This is Leisha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruitment podcast. And I am so excited and feeling a little bit emotional actually about my next guest because I've known this founder all the way through his recruitment career, which kind of shows what an OG I am, or how old I am, whichever way you want to look at it. But the fact that he has flourished, he's someone that I've continuously kept in touch with throughout the last plus 2 decades, it turns out. And I think that there's an awful lot that you, as the listener, can hopefully embark upon in terms of how he's been so successful for such a long period of time, and just what an amazing human being he is too. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Patrick Flanagan, who is the founder of Clarence George. Welcome to you today. How are you?
I'm very well, Alicia. Very well. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now, I'm just trying to rack my brains over the last 6 seasons. I think you might be our first guest who's recording from Northern Ireland. Possibly, I think we had Lou Doyle, who is the founder of Needy, but she's not based in Northern Ireland. I'm trying to think. But yes, I think you might officially be because you're back home for a short period of time, aren't you?
Right. Yeah. Officially on holiday, but as you well know, Alicia being a founder, we're never really ever on holiday. So yeah, just doing a bit of sort of working from home at the minute and trying to get out and doing a bit of meeting family and friends while I'm here as well.
All about the harmony. This is the real thing that's why I like to bring on founders because let's get real. We have a life outside of recruitment as well. So you're the founder of Clarence George. Tell us a little bit about your business and a bit about you. I know your journey. Talk us through a brief bio of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, got into recruitment. Wasn't actually my first job. I did a business sort of degree at uni, and then got into enterprise rent a car straight out of the uni undergraduate scheme, and worked for a couple of years with them in Edinburgh. And sort of like a lot of people, fell into recruitment. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but certainly speaking to lots of people in that were in the recruitment industry, I thought it would be a pretty good fit. And that's where we initially came across each other back in 2004, 21 years ago, believe it or not. So I'd moved to Manchester at that point and was looking to get into recruitment. And yeah, you had me a lot of interviews at the time. And I think I also feel really guilty about this. I've never actually accepted a job through you, Alicia.
I mean, he's one of just. I'm going to pause here. I was just about to say, should I have introduced you as you're the one that always gets away?
Yeah, possibly. So that was it. So got into recruitment in 2004. So yeah, I've been in recruitment for over 20 years now. It's been financial services recruitment. That was the sector I sort of gravitated to quite early when I was going around the recruitment firms. I pretty much asked a pretty basic question at the start, which is probably not a bad thing for anybody starting out in recruitment. Very, very selfishly, I was like, right, where can you make the most money?
Yep.
Um, and very quickly, it was at that stage. I don't know if it's now 20 years later if this is still the case, but at that stage, it was very much, especially in Manchester, it was either financial services recruitment or IT recruitment. So I had a number of interviews with both of those early days, and very quickly gravitated more towards the finance side. I've always been interested in. I did a business degree. Been very much an entrepreneur from a young age, doing little things in my spare time, very big into investments and stock market and stuff. So I just knew that was probably going to be the better sort of suited sector for me. And I think that was a really good choice, because I'm still here 20 odd years later. Because a lot of people do get into recruitment, but don't necessarily find the right sector, I feel, and they don't really vibe with it. And they might like recruitment and they might potentially be good at it,
Yeah.
but it never really works for them. So, that's probably one of my biggest bits of advice for anybody when they get into recruitment, because you don't really know what it is at the start and you won't know if you like it, but at least vibe with the sector that you're speaking to. So often a little bit of a tangent there, but that was a big thing for me was, definitely, if I'm going into recruitment, it's long hours, it's sales, it's hard work. Try and get into the most lucrative area. So yeah, I got into that, started accounting and finance recruitment in Manchester, did that for 6 years, really, really enjoyed it. Worked my way up to sort of a team leader, leading the team. But then the credit crunch, global financial crisis hit in 2007, 2008, and that just really rocked the market. There was lots of accountants and no jobs. So I had to make a decision at that point, which was very difficult to sort of pivot. And at that point, I was like, right, the way recruitment was going, I wanted to get into a sector that was going to be less affected by recessions or
Yeah.
what was coming down the line. And then I came across actuarial recruitment,
Yep.
which was sold to me, which wasn't too dissimilar from accountancy recruitment. They were very technical, mathematical type people working in insurance, banking, finance. So I pivoted into that in 2010, and that's what I've been since. 15 years later. I've worked in small to mid-sized business in that sector. I worked in a startup company that was private equity backed, and then in 2019 I launched Clarence George. So that was after about 15 years in the recruitment industry. I was always like, I want to set my own company at some point. And thankfully, I found a really good sector and good market
Without
because
question.
it is super niche, very high end, highly qualified people that are always in demand. So it's been a good sector to get into, and that's when Clarence George was set up 2019. So 6 years later, built the business up, doing about, on average, maybe about 1 million turnover per year. We fluctuate maybe between about 6 to 10 staff, and it probably won't get too much bigger than that because our business model is quite niche. There's only sort of 25,000 actuaries in the UK market. But we've got branching out into other areas as well. We do quite a lot of overseas work now in
Yeah.
places like Bermuda, Cayman Islands as well. And that's where we are today.
And you're based in London, your head office is London, but you do actually operate a hybrid sort of model, don't you? Where you seem to, I want, definitely want to understand how you've made that work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I always think it's quite funny actually because I never thought I'd actually end up in London. So when I graduated in Belfast, my first job was in Edinburgh. Main part of my career was in Manchester,
Yeah.
and I always thought, oh, I don't need to go to London. But ultimately, where I fell into my market, 90% of my clients and candidates are based in the city. So it just made sense for me, to come down here full time because I was doing a lot of traveling up and down to Manchester, and that was taking its toll. So I bit the bullet. I thought, right, I'll leave my northern brethren and go down south. And look, I've been down here since 2016. Set up the company in London in 2019 in London as well. So it's a small office. We're based right in the heart of the city. So got really good access to all our clients, which is mainly big life insurance companies, reinsurance, banks, asset managers, some family office, private equity. Doing the type of work that we do, it's where I would call the very top end of contingency recruitment and maybe the bottom rung of executive search. So we aren't really that high volume. So we don't need to be in London meeting people every single day.
Right.
Uh, but I'd say certainly, the way the team works at the minute, most of them live in and around London. So we really have a policy that's quite flexible where ideally 3 days in the office and 2 days from home. But with the likes of myself, I'll spend a week now working out of, Northern Ireland as well. So it's pretty flexible. It's pretty flexible. We don't need to be in the city every day, but it does help to be, it certainly does help to be there.
I'm just picking up on what you just said there, that you sort of the way you qualify where you're landing in the market, you're the senior end of contingency, but sort of on that bottom rung of executive search. So is that in terms of how you position yourself to the client? Are you doing it on an exclusive basis, or are you actually selling it on a retained solution for them?
Yeah, well, I think it really comes down to the sort of the salary levels that we work at, really. So, we probably started the market at sort of like what we call like a qualified level, a qualified actuary or qualified CFA. So CFAs is another, sizable part of our market as well, which are more on the investment side. So our salary, so the average salary band that we place at is between 70,000 GBP up to about 200,000. So just in that market, and this probably goes for a lot of recruitment sectors, you're sort of sitting in that sort of high end of contingency, bottom end of executive search,
Yeah.
because we would probably get, I'd say, 25% of our work as sort of exclusive or retained, and the rest would be sort of still very much contingency. So it's more when we're pushing towards the higher end of that band. That's when we can really go for more of the exclusivity or the retained side of things. I think a lot of people still very much, the bottom end of that band would very much work in that contingency space. So that's where we sort of straddle both areas really.
It's quite, I mean, I guess with what you said, I mean, I love the data that's coming out here that you've got 25,000 qualified actuaries in the UK. How many new qualified each year?
So so that's actually actuaries. That doesn't necessarily mean they're qualified or
No.
because
Oh, right, okay.
some of them are starting off and they're students and part qualified. So qualified, per year, you're probably talking about anything really between sort of 600 to 800 qualifying per year. As
Wow,
that
it's such a small number. So how do you
it is.
ensure How do you ensure? Because what I'm trying to do here is, if somebody else that's listening is in a candidate short market where it's talent short, how do you ensure that you're penetrating those newly qualified people to ensure that they come to you when they're looking for a role?
Yeah, so I think that's the benefit in many ways of being a smaller market. You know, when I was in accounting and finance, you really don't get to know your market. It's just too big, it's too vast. And even though I specialised within a vertical in accounting and finance, which was financial services, there's still hundreds of thousands of candidates. So for me, it actually is that you will probably only really be wanting to work with 10-15% of that market, because within actuarial, they are very much working for specific sectors, which is life insurance, general insurance, pensions, investments. Where I've done most of my work is life insurance. So again, within that 25,000, there's probably 7,000 life insurance actuaries.
Right.
Now, where I operate is qualified. So within those 7,000 life insurance actuaries, half of them are only qualified. So realistically speaking, where do we get our candidates from? It really is the old-fashioned sort of, word of mouth, referrals, networking. Yes, we use LinkedIn, of course. Who doesn't nowadays? But I mean, I've got a LinkedIn recruiter license, and I can't remember the last time I sent an email. It's just the way it is. It's once you've been in this market for such a length of time, and that's why I've really enjoyed this market, because if you're a recruiter that it's all about reputation, providing a high quality service and trying to build a business on that ethos, then it's a great market, because with that sort of patience and mid to long term vision, once you've built your brand in this market, a lot of my business now is inbound, which after 20 years used to say in any business that should be the case. But I don't think recruitment sometimes, speaking to, peers, is like that, and so a lot of it is that case of network and referrals and building that brand within the market.
It's lessons for those listening. I think that you can create that. I don't think it does happen overnight, and it doesn't have to take 20 years. Key Recruitment's just celebrated 20 years, and we are 100% inbound. Like you say, you would expect that over a period of time, but that's down to all the graft and all the integrity that we've put into every single process every single time. You earn the trust so that people then do go and refer and recommend you. I just find it really interesting because you are like the epitome of niche within a niche. And I think going back to what you said earlier on, and I'm not asking you to necessarily sort of repeat what you've said, but I find it really interesting that what you said is that you love your sector, and clearly that's what's created this passion. And I interview a lot of recruiters who are despondent in their field, they're not feeling challenged. Maybe it's possibly a shrinking market, potentially it's one that's being threatened by AI replacing the candidates that they're placing. And I truly believe that if you know that as an industry this is what you enjoy doing, and yes, it should be equally lucrative to career progression and meritocratic reward. But I think if you actually enjoy the people that you're engaging with and that you're interviewing and that you're going out to visit, it just means it doesn't feel like a slog all of the time. It feels natural, and it creates a much more authentic service, I think. If you were doing what you're doing in a market where you weren't naturally interested or tenacious and curious, then would you have set up on your own? Who knows? I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but I think you have to be equally passionate as well as driven and seeking a lucrative career.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Because exactly after a while, when you've set up anything, really, the challenge of that sort of wears off, and then you can just look around and go, do I actually enjoy this? Do I enjoy this market? And I think you need a market that sort of values that as well. So
Yeah.
and realistically seeking those markets that have a demand for talent, and it can change in your career, and it happened to me in 2007. I absolutely loved where I was working, really loved my team, loved my boss, and then literally overnight we were just like, what's happened? Lehman Brothers out of business, global financial crisis. I was like, wow, and that was a big lesson. And you go through these in your career, but you've got to be flexible and pivot. And I was very fortunate that I was able to find something still in Manchester at the time, which was very similar, but was becoming a bit more specialised, a bit more niche in the market. And that's what I said to people. Sometimes you have to sort of pivot, and you have to adjust and see what's coming down the line and seeing those trends. And don't get me wrong, not for any second is our market easy. or, the challenges that I'm sure these are the recruiters you speak to talk about. We get them as well. Internal recruitment is caught into our market now. It was never really a thing
Right.
for many years. But they are now, as I said, coming aggressively into our patch, not necessarily doing a good job, but we're at the stage now where a lot of clients are especially the larger clients that we work with, have to go through corporate protocols and use them and stuff. So yeah, it is the case of look at what else is new, and I'm very much very being an entrepreneur by nature. That's why we've expanded internationally in recent years as well, because the UK market hasn't been as good. And we're seeing maybe with our market as well, it could definitely be impacted by AI as well. And it's to say, well, okay, do we sort of branch more into that area as well? So we're very much always thinking that way, because even being small and niche, as I said, we're not immune to any of the challenges that the rest of the recruitment industry is facing.
I love the fact that you are adaptable. And I think when you are a boutique business, which is how I would describe you and Key Recruitment, by the way, you can be more adaptable. And I think you can't put your head in the sand. And I'm always very dismayed when I meet with clients who are just almost irreverent to what's actually happening. And the fact that you're acknowledging, and by the way, we have a lot of people who are in internal tier that listen as well to the show. And, there's a huge value in what they do. They're having similar challenges with AI, the integration of it. Is it there to replace them? Ultimately, we know that it's the people using the AI that ultimately that's the trajectory we're on. I bloody hope so anyway, otherwise we're all going to be out of a job. So that's my summation of the last 2 years of interviewing people about what AI, the impact is. We don't really know the reality is, but we can see that what you're suggesting there, that in your industry, I think has happened in a lot of tech-based firms. It's happened in construction. It's happening, not just in one particular sector. It's how you adapt to that challenge and how you almost embrace it, I suppose. But I think that it's interesting that, you do use the word pivot, because it was taken out your choice. You had no choice in 2008 to do that. And obviously that's happened in very recent times to a lot of people, which is how the podcast came about. So I know that it's very relevant for those that kind of in COVID maybe were on one trajectory and then gone on furlough or been made redundant. I've had to go and do this now. And I think the fact is that, your career is not over if you're in a challenging market right now, but do your research. I think, you knew you had something that was, a niche that was relevant to the knowledge that you had picked up and that you'd utilized for a number of years. And make sure, I mean, no one can really predict, but you'd like to think that there's ways that you can see whether there's a forecast that this is going to be talent short. Let's not forget just recession proof. Now let's not forget pandemic proof. And make sure it's an industry. Would you add anything to that in terms of if this is someone that's listening that knows they need to pivot, they're in an industry that's declining.
Yeah, yeah. So my view on it is, I really wouldn't want to be working for a huge recruitment company today. I really want, and I suppose my first role was with a relatively sizable recruitment company. Because the reality of it is, it is getting tougher, and there's no getting away from that. So for me, it is about definitely seeking a business where you've got maybe a bit of freedom to be able to look at different markets and try different things within it. Because sometimes in a large corporate, you will be very much, this is your role, and there's very little you can do about that. So I would say, certainly maybe the more small to mid-sized businesses, I certainly would love to speak to people that would come in and challenge me and say, Patrick, look, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm looking at, because we've got to all be like that at the minute. I mean, you can just look at from the results of recruitment firms over the last number of years. We don't have to name the big ones specifically, but, the financial results have been absolutely terrible. Right. So you got to look at it, and it's maybe sometimes the newer firms that are actually seeing something different within the market is a big part of it as well. I think secondly, I'd add, it has to be a skill set that you're recruiting that is going to be growing and ideally is in finite demand. Because the reality of it is, a bit like what I experienced with the accountancy people back in the day, is if somebody can stick out a LinkedIn advert at an internal recruiter or direct themselves as a company, then they don't see the value. They don't see the value when they're getting lots of CVs coming in. Of actually you going and using a specialist headhunter as well. So for me as well, sometimes it's the case of looking at a market, and that market may not necessarily be well established today. as something that you want to be sort of maybe, looking at as a side project, or actually trying to suck it and see a little bit to develop it as well. And look, there's no doubt there will be a market, whatever the sort of ramifications of AI is in 5 to 10 years, there's going to be actually a recruitment market after that, which will have probably very specific AI related jobs that don't even exist today. So I'm not actually that worried about AI as such, really, because again, is that it'll just be sort of a new technology that's come in. I've seen it lots of times in accounting, finance, and actuarial. A new system comes in, a new bit of technology. It really shakes people up, but it's the ones that are able to adapt and pivot quite quickly. So that's the sort of the second thing I would say is about looking for that sort of skill set that you think will constantly be in demand, and doing your research and homework around that to say, well, look, is there much competition in this market at the minute? And can you be that sort of first mover advantage? Because that's huge as well. And I've experienced that being a startup. It's very difficult to budget the big recruitment companies when you're starting up in a sector that's already well established. I was very fortunate that I'd been, in bigger companies, was well known. I was able to get onto some massive PSLs with regards to names, but really they're only my business for probably about less than 1% of their workforce. But they're using me because they won't go to the bigger suppliers because they just won't be able to understand this little niche, this little sector. They'll go to them for maybe compliance jobs, audit jobs, IT jobs, legal jobs. They'll come to us. So just a little bit of advice as well is just being able to look, necessarily just, you have to get into a market. Absolutely. If I could sum this up, which is absolutely candidate. It's the candidate that's the key, not the client.
Love
Oh,
that. Well, you're preaching to me on that, aren't you?
yeah, absolutely. Well,
Absolutely.
that's it. But look, for me, is AI really going to be able to place that passive candidate that is not looking for a job, that's in their mind blissfully happy with what they're doing at the moment? They're not even looking at LinkedIn jobs. They're not on websites looking for jobs. This is where we come in, right? Really understanding these people and building those personal relationships over and it doesn't have to be 20 years, as you say, Leisha. You could do this in 18 months, 2 years, by being persistent, by getting out of the office, the old-fashioned approach, God forbid,
Yeah.
meeting
Meeting
people for
people in
coffee.
real life.
Absolutely. And that's why my office is in London, right? But that's why I spend a lot of money. Like my office in London is my second biggest cost after my staff, right? There's a reason why I've got that based in London, because it absolutely is all about being able to meet people for coffees and keep in touch with them and understand where they're going. Because we are the ones that will be able to come to them with the left field roles or the jobs that they don't think about, and be able to engage them and have those conversations.
Definitely.
So again, being in a market where you've got the freedom to do that, and if you are in a very much a high volume KPI, just getting CVs out the door, I do believe AI will come for that market.
Those days are well and truly numbered. We already know that. No, it's very reassuring to have that conversation because, I think everything that you've said there, it's almost interesting, isn't it, that we've known each other as long as this full circle's almost going back on itself, where it is about relationships, it is about being present, being in person with your clients and your candidates and, your community. There's obviously, if you're not already doing events or going to events, even if you're not hosting them, you are definitely missing a trick. And I think, I just want to hammer home again this candidate-led approach that in a market where you are going to be white noise amongst everybody else, if you look after those passive people, the people that have the value in whatever you're recruiting, that's where your future proof is, in my experience and my opinion. So I
Yeah,
think you've nailed it there. It was almost like a pitch for key recruitment there. So thanks for that.
very good, very good.
I cannot believe we've not actually seen each other for 21 years, which makes me feel quite sad and scared because the last time this man saw me, I was heavily pregnant with my eldest daughter, who's 21 now. So that makes me feel like a true OG. You have been absolutely wonderful. Do you host a podcast or anything? Have you got any community that we can tag for you?
No, I don't. No, it's something that's absolutely, it's been something at the back of my mind for a while. But as you know yourself, setting up a business, 6 years now. The first 5 years are a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Just getting that first year is always key to get through, because obviously, like you hear all the stories about most businesses failing in the first year, and that was obviously very conscious in my mind at the time, and the type of recruitment we do. I think our first placement didn't come into it was probably at month 7 before we got like the first placement.
In
But yeah,
COVID or
uh,
before COVID? Was it before?
it was the year before. Yeah, it was 2019. So, but they are reasonable, sizable placements. You know, our sort of average fee as a business is maybe around about £25,000 per placement. So, you know, yes, it takes a while to build that. You're not doing that in month one or month two. But when they did start to come in, it was about month seven, month eight, and we were just really starting to take off. And then that first year, we then experienced COVID as well, which was an interesting experience to say the least. But again, we got, you know, I think that when people ask me actually about, you know, what's my proudest achievement setting up the company, well, yeah, getting over, you know, 1 million turnover. Sometimes these numbers sound great, but that didn't really, you know, excite me that much in making profit. It was more a case of being able to keep my staff through COVID. That was probably my number one. Because I hired two people in 2019, and yeah, we were just starting to get going, and then all of a sudden, you know, we were pretty much like, oh, what's happening? You know, all the jobs were pulled, and then some of my, you know, competitors, some of the big firms that, you know, make, you know, huge amounts of profit every year, were putting people on furlough and making them redundant, and I never did that. You know, I was able to keep my staff, albeit it was only two people.
Doesn't
But
matter. It's still an achievement, honestly.
and you know, this is the first year in business as well, really. So, you know, there's a case of like, well, like, what do you want to challenge me more, really? But to be able to say to
Keep
me,
throwing it. Keep throwing it at me. Woof.
yeah. I mean, I'm a bit like that anyway. I love sort of just challenges, but maybe that was just a bit like a bit too much. But nobody could sort of legislate that coming, really, right? It was a case of, but again, thankfully, being the market we're in, after about 4 or 5 months, you know, being professional people that could work from home from their laptop, then the recruitment started coming back again, and then we really took off then, and then, you know, 2022 ended up being a massive year for us as well. So. But again, it's all part of the journey and learns as well.
It is.
From that perspective.
You do
So,
it all
so
again.
yeah,
Would you do it all again though?
yeah, no, I would, because as I said, I think that's what, you know, life's about, Leisha. That, you know, it's not all about plain sailing and just being in your comfort zone. Yeah, there's been sleepless nights. There's been worry about, you know, that invoice needs to be paid. Um, I need to pay bills, staff. But you know, if you cut out that way to be an entrepreneur, and you got to, the only thing that I've ever really learned in my life is through mistakes or not doing things well. You can read as many textbooks or look at as many
Yeah.
podcasts as you want.
Yeah.
You got to get your skin in the game and go for it. And ultimately,
Love it.
what's the worst that can happen? What is? And I've always said this, but I always knew I could go back to a corporate job in recruitment. I always knew I could.
Yeah.
But there was no way I was. There was just absolutely no way. I was going to do whatever it took, work, you know, to midnight every night, weekends, knock on as many doors as possible, get out of the office and all the rest of it to make it work. And there's nothing like that passion. And you will always beat a fellow competitor when you've got that drive
I
of your
agree.
own, business, and
Definitely.
to be successful.
You either do you either have that or you don't. As I always say in the gym, I don't know why I seem to be the cheerleader in the gym. And someone will say, I can't do that, I can't lift that weight. And I'm like, well, if you think you can, you're right. If you think you can't, you're right. You just have to choose which it's going to be. So
Yeah.
that's the same for recruitment, and it's the same for anyone that is thinking about launching on their own. You have been absolutely wonderful, and I know you've done a few podcasts, but I don't think you've done one that's specifically for the recruitment, can't even say it, community. So I'm really honoured that you've chosen to come on the Recruiters Recruitment podcast. Thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your trip to Northern Ireland.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Pleasure, as always.
Thanks so much.